the man, the myth, the legend is finally making his appearance on episode number 8. Here he is, the Shirtless Wonder. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being episode number 8.
I'm excited to be here. The Shirtless Wonder is a perfect name for me because I don't ever wear a shirt.
Not even during warm-ups.
It gets hot. I mean...
What do you do in the winter in our big new space?
Take my shirt off.
Just all the time?
All the time.
So for those of you that are tuning into this is the Marcus Gossard as our Shirtless Wonder. So, but I want to start off this episode tonight with kind of how you got into CrossFit, just a little bit, because when I interviewed your wife, I know that she was the first one, and then she finally roped you into it, correct?
Yeah, so it kind of went like this. Hi, Dax. Can you get down? Stop bothering us during the podcast. Thanks. I've always been active. I was a runner in high school, and I ran in college, and played basketball, played pretty much all sports, and I officiate. So I always wanted to stay in shape because I officiate college basketball. Worked high school basketball for a long time, but how I got to CrossFit was Kim and I were actually working out at the Y in Fishers. We met Matt Newman kind of there, and I just remember he just didn't look like he belonged at the Y to me.
Really?
Long hair, tats, just like...
He had long hair?
Yeah. He just looked like a cool dude, looked like a band guy, some guy you hang out with and party with, but just didn't look like a trainer to me, but whatever. We went on to start... Kim was training me actually for a while, and we were working out with a guy that I went to high school with, doing CrossFit type stuff. It was more of just circuit training. Like it was, I mean, there were weights involved, and we squatted, but there was a lot of battle slams with ropes and burpees and box jumps and stuff. So it was CrossFit-esque, but it wasn't CrossFit. So some friends of ours who have moved on from Indiana invited us to the Murph Memorial Day. They're like, hey, you should come to the Murph and do the Murph with us. And I'm like, what's the Murph? They're like, well, it's a memorial workout for a soldier that was killed, and there's running and pull-ups and push-ups, and we have a cookout and drink afterwards. And we're like, oh, cool, that'd be great. So we went, I want to say 2014. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it was 2014. My first workout was Murph, and it was brutal.
and how many times have you done Murph after that?
Lots of times.
Yep.
And I realized then when I showed up that the Matt that was the owner of the CrossFit box was the same Matt that was at the Y.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh my gosh, Kim, there's the guy from the Y.
Yeah.
So we went, we did it, and we continued doing our normal training. And then we came back a year later. Same people invited us back, said, hey, you should come back. I'm like, okay, cool. Another day of drinking and eating and
all
working
the best
out.
Things.
Yeah. So we went back again, and Kim said, I'm hooked. I'm joining. And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe not, maybe not. She's like, I'm going. So she signed up for 5 days a week, the full, whatever. And I told Matt, at the time we live in Noblesville, so the box is kind of far away, being at, 96th. And I just told Matt, I was like, man, like I want to come and everything, but I'm so far away. I don't know if I'll, make it every day. And so he's like, hey, you know what? Your wife signed up, you come and check it out and see if you like it. And so I started going 3 days a week for, a couple of months. And it was really hard. It was really hard.
What was the hardest for you to kind of get through?
Just the mobility part, and like, thinking that CrossFit was, I'm an athlete, so automatically athletes think that, oh, CrossFit should be easy because I'm an athlete. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because when you learn about CrossFit, functional movements at high intensity, and it's very functional. So you have to do the movements correctly in order for it to be efficient. And I just wasn't good at it. And so I wanted to quit like 3 or 4 times.
Did you really?
I did.
I did not expect that to come from you.
I wanted to quit, and so I almost quit 3 or 4 times, and it was really difficult, and it was frustrating because I thought that it should just be easier, but it wasn't. But I ended up, Matt and I had a little chat, and he's like, look, if you really want to do this, you can't just do it 3 days a week. You got to come 5 days a week because of the way the programming's set up, that, if you miss a day or if you miss 2 days, the programming's set up so that you're working your body in a certain way that you're not going to be happy. You're not going to maximize what you're trying to do for yourself and what we're trying to do for you. So I ended up, about 3 months in, I ended up signing up for 5 days a week, and here we are.
I was going to say, have you ever looked back from that sign-up date, or?
Yeah, I have looked back, but there's been benchmarks, and goals that have been met and achievements that have been made, and so I'm a guy that you got to set small goals, you got to set mini goals in order to reach an ultimate big goal. Because if you go into CrossFit and say, hey, I'm going to overhead squat, which I hate doing. I'm going to overhead squat.
I've been very impressed. You're working on it way more than you used to, which is a great thing to hear.
I'm going to overhead squat. I'm going to overhead squat 225 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great goal to have, but the reality is you should say, I want to overhead squat 45 pounds, 10 times before I move on. And so I've always been that way in everything I do, just setting mini goals and helping you, achieve the ultimate goal.
So have you taught that, because I know you've got kids, have you kind of taught that for them? Like, sometimes it's better to set those small attainable goals versus, all right, let's go for this huge big goal at the end.
Absolutely. Our kids are both Kim's not as insane as I am about, competing, but she is competitive. And both of my kids are competitive as well. And Braden specifically, our son, who's going to be 21 here shortly.
Are you excited for that birthday?
I'm more excited than the wife is, so yeah.
Are you going to take him out?
He wants to go to Nashville, Tennessee for his 21st birthday.
Really?
So I kind of feel like that maybe if his parents are there, it might be better. I don't know.
I recently saw a picture on, I think it was like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and it was packed. Like the street was packed to the rim. Out the bars were like packed to the rim. It's like COVID never happened down there right now.
That's another subject. We don't want to talk about that.
No, we'll stay away from that.
So my son specifically is a lot like, he's very competitive, but he's also not good at really setting benchmarks. He just has a big goal, which is fine to have big goals in life, but you're going to get frustrated if you just have big goals. You got to set small benchmarks to meet those small benchmarks to, ultimately achieve what you want. And so I've tried to teach both my kids that anything in life, not just CrossFit, but work, school, even relationships with people, you've got to have small goals with, you just can't be like, hey, I want to get married to that person to be happily married for the next 60 years. Well, there's a lot that goes into that, so it's not just sports. It's not just CrossFit. It's life in general. So he's become better at it.
Have you noticed a change versus growing up through school and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is maturity and kind of, looking. He's done a lot more looking back probably than I have in his short life. Just, thinking if I would have just done what you told me sooner, and we all do that. We all, that's the only way you really learn to get better is to look back and really look at yourself, Be your own worst critic. Because if somebody else is always critiquing you, it can it can help, but I tell guys in officiating that the only way you're really going to get better is to actually critique yourself. It doesn't matter how many people tell you that, you do this well, you do that well, you need to improve on these things. If you really don't ever see yourself doing it, and we encourage watching a lot of video and officiating. It's no different than CrossFit when you put the video down and we take a video of ourselves doing a muscle up, or we take a video of ourselves doing an overhead squat. You took videos of yourself doing lots of things,
Right.
And making sure my form's right. And you don't really know your form's bad until you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's really bad.
The kettlebell swinging snatch. I will never forget that.
Right. You know what I
That's
mean?
engraved in my mind.
Yeah. And I'm the king. I'm also not only the Shirtless Wonder, I'm the king of poor form.
But that's only just with snatches. Everything else, you move pretty well. And we challenged each other with a burpee and dumbbell snatch.
Right.
But at the same time, you still moved efficiently. But you talk about officiating a lot. So what got you interested in going for refereeing? And did you start with high school and then you now are college?
This is a long story. I'll make it short.
Sure.
I played basketball until I was a junior in high school. My favorite sport's basketball. I love basketball. I watch other sports. I'm interested in other sports. I'm a golf freak, but it's because I'm almost 50.
Is that with age?
I can't play basketball anymore. But when I was a student at IU, I was playing intramurals and being very competitive, playing the sport, understanding the rules, and they're paying students $5 an hour to referee that don't have a clue what they're doing.
Right.
And it's, as you get older and more mature, you look back and go, well, why would they? No one's training them. No one's telling them. But I got irritated because we'd have certain, games where we'd have students working our games and they'd have no clue what's happening. I'm like, I go to the director of officiating, who was a peer of mine at IU, and complain to him about the fact that the officiating just is pretty much sucks. And his response was, why don't you start officiating and help us get better? And I'm like, okay. I mean, why not? I mean,
yeah.
I should probably. I should not complain if I'm not going to be, go try it,
Right.
So I started doing it and then realized at the time, a couple of my other buddies that I met that were officiating, in college, you don't have a lot of money, right?
Right.
I mean, my parents pay for my school and that was about it. They didn't like to go, oh, you can lavishly spend on whatever you want. So
yeah, no.
It was an easy way for me to still be active in the sport. And, as a college student in the summertime, there's AAU tournaments everywhere. And you'd get paid like 18 or 20 bucks a game when that was a long time ago, but still 18, 20 bucks a game when you're a college student and you can do 10 in a day. You're like,
yeah,
I'm going to make $200 today. And you make $200 every weekend. Now you've made $800 for the month. And that was a lot of money for me. So that's really what got me into officiating. And then ironically, when I moved back from IU and Kim and I got married and I moved back to Hamilton County, which I'm from, I just started working freshman games and middle school games just around here, called the ADs that I knew around the area and just told them, hey, I'm officiating. And they loved it. They're like, oh man, we need, because there's not a plethora of guys like sitting around going to do a 7th and 8th grade boys game. There's just not. So it was good for me to learn. And the guy that I mentioned earlier at IU, I was at Carmel High School. I was working a boys freshman game and he was working a girls varsity game, happened to be on the same night.
Wow.
Boys freshman games in one gym, girls varsity games in the main gym.
Of course, it's Carmel.
Yeah,
they have everything.
And I'm a Carmel grad, by the way.
Go Greyhounds!
And so we're in the same locker room, and I'm like, "Hey, John, hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Marcus, man, what's up?" I said, "What happened to you?" He's like, "Well, I moved to Illinois for a couple of years and was teaching there, and I wanted to get back home because he's actually from Crown Point, but ended up staying he moved back to the Indianapolis area and was actually at Brownsburg." And we just kind of hooked up. He's like, you should hook up and do some girls varsity games with me. I'm like, cool. So he and I started working some girls varsity games together, and then he was kind of already in the system, I guess, in Indiana. I was just kind of hanging around, still doing it because I liked it, and I made $50 or $60 on a couple weekends. I made a couple $100 again for Kim and I. It was great, right?
So that was with AAU and like just high school games and middle school games.
Just high school games. I really wasn't doing AAU anymore. Just like doing a middle school game on a you do 2 games at a middle school, might take you a couple hours, and they pay $90.
Yeah.
So you're making $50 an hour to go over to Noblesville Middle School, which is 5 minutes away, and you do that. You do a couple of those a week. You're making an extra couple $100 a week for your family, and you're really not gone that much. So fast forward, John and I work some girls varsity games together, and he kind of tells me, hey, if you want to really get into high school officiating, he kind of helped me navigate through it, and here's who you need to get involved with, and so on and so forth. Well, so I started refereeing high school basketball in 1998, let's say.
I was only 1 year old.
1998. I probably actually started in like 1996, but I was just leaving IU, and I really wasn't working high school yet. But when I got back here, Kim and I got married in 97, so I would say 97, 98 was like my first year. In that process of getting, kind of figuring out how you get varsity games and who to talk to, and back then it was kind of you call the ADs and let them know, and now there's more signers in the state. They didn't really have assigners back then. Now there's usually there's still ADs that do their own assigning, but a lot of ADs don't want to mess with it because they have so much other stuff to do, so they hire guys to do it for them.
Okay.
So at that time, there was a couple around here, and so one of them is named Eric Harmon, and nobody on this podcast will probably know who Eric Harmon is, but Eric Harmon worked in the Big Ten for like 25 years, worked in the Mid-American Conference Division I for 30 years.
Wow. Worked
in the Missouri Valley. He actually was the high school assigner for the can't remember the name of the conference now. It's not the Olympic Conference. Anyway, Newcastle, Marion, Anderson, Muncie Central. I forget what the conference is, but it was like the big deal. If you wanted to work high school, like big time high school basketball, you wanted to work in that conference. Well, he ended up being the guy who was assigning games for that conference. So another twist of the story, my dad worked for Purdue National Bank back in 1970, and my dad worked with Eric's brother.
Man, you just got